Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wildcard Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Ben Pulowski. I'm a Senior Learning Center trainer here at Geotab. And our topic for today's Wildcard Wednesday, best practices for large fleets. So we are going to be looking at the database a little bit, some of the different options and tools that you have available to you that you might not know about, and that hopefully will make your life a little bit easier in dealing with large amounts of vehicles, assets, users, groups, things like that. I am joined by David Fuchs, who is one of our account relationship coordinators, and he's going to be available to answer any questions that you have at any point. So if you do have questions during the webinar, you can go ahead, type those into the questions box. David will answer those for you, and we'll also have some time at the end for questions as well. So here is our agenda for today's webinar. So some of the different things in the database that we are going to be covering. So some things on users and security clearances, looking at grouping, some different options for organizing and structuring your fleet. Rules, some of the tools available to you there. If you have vehicles in different locations or different vehicle types, different time zones. Reporting is a big topic, so we'll show you, again, some of the tools in the database and also some custom reports that we have available in the Geotab marketplace that help you synthesize a large amount of data. Finally, we're going to look at mass editing, the groups filter, and we'll start with security clearances. And simply put, security clearances control which features users have access to in the database. And that's sort of at the heart of database management, because you as the administrator, you have ultimate control over who can do what and who can see what. And if this is something that you have in order, especially before you start giving users access to the database and to your data, it is going to make your life a lot easier. The default security clearances are administrator, supervisor, view only, default user, drive app user, and nothing. And every one of those default security clearances have their own defined set of features. There's a link right here on this image, and there's also a link at the end of the presentation. But there's a document that we have developed that goes over all of those standard security clearances, and you'll be able to see exactly who can do what, who can access what, who can administer different parts of the database, administer users, create groups, rules, run reports. So that's all available to you in this document. So looking at some of the individual clearances, a best practice is going to be to assign roles within the company. And these are just different things to think about. So maybe you want to have at your executive level, those are going to be administrators. Maybe at the regional manager level, those are going to be supervisors. Departmental leads would be view only. Dispatchers would be a default user. And if you have drivers, you could go with a drive app user or even a nothing security clearance, so they wouldn't be able to view any data. So this is just a suggestion, just sort of, food for thought. And again, you want to understand what each permission does before you hand these out. And you want to understand who you want to control what. So are they going to have access to rules? Do you want them to be able to create rules or edit rules or even view rules? What vehicles do you want them to view? Do you want them to be able to run reports? Do you want them to be able to administer other users? To look at these clearances individually for a moment, I don't have administrator up here because administrator can do anything and everything in the database. That's the highest security clearance. There's things that you might not know about some of the other security clearances. So a supervisor, for example, did you know a supervisor can administer devices? So they could change the name of a vehicle. They could add a vehicle to the database, or they could delete it from the database. They could adjust driver feedback. They can edit rules or create rules or turn off rules. They could adjust your speeding rule. They can edit work hours. They can create and edit zones. And I bring this up because these might not necessarily want to be things that you would want a supervisor to be able to do. Maybe they are, maybe not, but just so you're aware. The two other clearances I want to touch on here are a default user and view only. The names are a little bit misleading because a view-only security clearance actually has a lot more permissions than a default user does. A default user, that security clearance is mainly going to be used for users just concerned with vehicle tracking. And I'll show you exactly what I mean. So this is a few screenshots of the left sidebar menu in the Geotab database. Over there on the left, you have administrator. It's got everything. Just to the right of that is view only. Now, at first glance, it looks identical, but if you look at rules and groups on administrator, on view only, it says exceptions. Under administration, view only doesn't have much there, but it's a lot closer to administrator than a default user is. When a default user logs into the database with that clearance, that's all they see and that's all they get. One thing that you do have the ability to do is to create custom security clearances. So if you want someone who want them to be able to deal with zones and work hours, but you don't want to risk having a supervisor who can edit a device, then you can edit that security clearance. And I'm actually going to jump into a database real quickly here and show you how. This is one of the items you're going to have a resource on how to do at the end. So we have a video and we have a written guide on how to edit these security clearances. But what you can do, if you're an administrator, you can go to your users list under administration. And right up here at the top, you have this button that says clearances. Now, the leftmost clearances here are the default ones. So you have administrator, supervisor, default user, drive app user, etc. The ones underneath administrator that are indented a little bit, those are the custom security clearances that were built off of the administrator clearance. So if you think about stock rules and you think about custom rules, so with some limited exceptions, you can't really edit a stock rule. For most of them, it's really just turn it on or off. If you want to edit a rule, you have to make a custom rule. Same thing here. I can't edit the default security clearance of administrator, but I can copy that clearance and edit it. So for example, let's start with supervisor. This shows me all the things that a supervisor can do, and it's the same as what's in this document that I showed you earlier. And if I want to create a sub-clearance based off of supervisor, I can click this button right up here that says Add Sub-Clearance. So parent, supervisor, that's what I'm building it off of. I can create a name for this sub-clearance, so we'll just call this Wildcard Wednesday. And then these are all just little check marks here. So I can toggle things on or off depending on what I want them to be able to do. The one I mentioned earlier was edit devices, and that's listed here under administer devices. So maybe I want to uncheck those for this supervisor setting. Save it, and that's all there is to it. Now, when I go into my users list, and I can assign them a security clearance, right here from this dropdown, here's the one I just created. So this is basically going to be a user with a supervisor clearance who cannot edit any vehicles. So that same thing here is displayed under the security clearance dropdown. Below that, you have the data access, which is different from security clearance. Security clearance is what a user can do. Data access is what data can the user see. So what vehicles, what assets can they see when they're logged into the database or when reports go out? So the next big topic that we're going to get into here is grouping. And grouping allows you to separate your fleet into different buckets. You're basically setting up a hierarchy or a structure for your fleet. And there's some different ways that you can do that. So just for example, you could organize your fleet by department. So in that image on the top right, we have within departments, exec, maintenance, operations, sales. And that also shows you an example of subgroups. So you can have groups inside of groups inside of groups. You could organize your fleet by region, east, north, south, west. You could organize your fleet by vehicle type, whether it's heavy duty, medium duty, or light duty vehicles. you can have these different hierarchies that exist simultaneously. So if you want to be able to look at your data in different ways, if you want to look at it by department, or if you want to look at it by region, you can have both coexisting simultaneously, and that's fine. You can also, another option for grouping is to use it to set up your reporting. We'll touch on that a little bit more later. But just as a preview to that, you can keep your reporting hierarchy separate from the rest of your fleet's organization if you want to, depending on what you want your users to be able to access. So ideally, the way that you group your fleet should mirror your business setup in some way. And it allows you, again, to look at data, to look at groups of vehicles in different ways, identify trends maybe that can be traced back to whatever is specific about that group. So if you're have your fleet grouped by regions, maybe you can pick out, certain groups have higher idling than others. Maybe that's attributable to that region being in a warmer climate. You might have, maybe you see more after hours usage in certain regions. Well, maybe that manager is lax about following procedure and doesn't really care if his drivers use the vehicles outside of work hours. Maybe you have trucks that have lower fuel economy. Well, if you're looking at it by vehicle type, you can see that those are the delivery trucks and they have a lower fuel economy because they spend more time in stop and go traffic. So I had previously mentioned security clearance as being at the heart of database management. And on an individual user level, that's true. But if you take a step back and sort of view things on the next highest level up from there, the next important thing is group creation and management. So how are you organizing? What are you doing with your hierarchy? And that's all it is. It's just a structure. You don't need to assign individual users to groups. You can, but you don't have to. But it all comes down to knowing if that's data that you're going to want to isolate at some point. You can assign users to multiple groups. That's totally fine. Multiple groups are not going to overlap. So this user that we're looking at here has access to the maintenance group and access to the East group. This user can see all of those groups and not just the vehicles that are assigned to maintenance and East, if that makes sense. When you give a user data access, everything is filtered through this. If you send out a report for all vehicles, that user is only going to see the vehicles that are in these groups. If they log into the database, as far as they're concerned, these are the only groups that exist. So let's get into rules a little bit here. Rules, of course, powerful way to monitor and manage a fleet. And ideally, these rules should be designed and implemented around your company's policies and procedures. So trying to ultimately monitor data on your drivers and understand their behavior, and then through rules and driver coaching, hopefully change it and improve that behavior. You have here your stock rules. So these 3 rules, for example, harsh braking, hard acceleration, harsh cornering. Your stock rules apply to every single vehicle in your fleet. Doesn't matter what type of vehicle they are, doesn't matter where they are, doesn't matter who their manager is. These built-in rules apply to everyone. And sometimes that's okay. Seatbelt rule, you want everyone to wear their seatbelt. Possible accident, low battery, device removal. Those are things that you may want to apply to all of your vehicles. But if you want to, you can also create different rules for different groups. So after you have set up your groups and you've assigned vehicles to those groups, you can customize those. Some examples of that, you can do aggressive driving rules for different vehicle types. And the reason that you would want to do that, well, think about a vehicle driving down the road at 50 miles an hour and they slam on the brakes. If you have a Toyota Corolla that does that, it's going to be a much more violent reaction to that than a tractor trailer. So we have to measure them differently. We're ultimately looking at G-force, which is the force exerted upon the vehicle. Another example, maybe you want to monitor after hours usage for vehicles in different locations, different time zones, or that are in different shifts. Maybe you have speeding rules for different regions within the US. So for example, we're out here in the Southwest, parts of Nevada and Utah, the speed limit is 75 or even 80 miles an hour. In the Northeast US, you're probably not going to see that too much. You could have a custom rule based around a zone. So maybe there is a certain office or a certain area that only admins or executives should be entering, and other drivers are not permitted to enter that area. So just some different examples of how you could use rules. Among the resources you're going to get, resources on setting up work hours, changing different time zones for different vehicles, creating custom rules. Something else to consider, so email notifications and distribution lists. I had mentioned when we were talking about data access that every single thing a user can see is filtered through whatever is in their data access. So again, even if you have an email and you tell it to send out to everyone in the company, not that you would ever do this, but for example, I want an email to go out to everyone when a vehicle breaks a seatbelt rule. The only people that are going to get that email are the people who have data access to that vehicle. So when you're setting up your email notifications and distribution lists, you don't have to worry too much about who needs to get what, because a lot of that is going to happen in the background through the data access that you have assigned to the users. So looking at reporting a little bit here, reporting can be customized to display different reports and data sets for different groups. And when I'm talking about reporting in this instance, I'm talking about automated reports, primarily email reports. It would apply to dashboard reporting as well. But these automated reports that you have set up to send out to users in your database. And there's two different options within these automated reports to take note of: recipient list and belonging to. Recipient list is who receives the report, or who can view the report. This is based off of grouping. Recipient list, it says all in company group. That means when this report emails out, it's going to go out to everyone in the company. Or I can have it just go out to my Chicago group or my heavy trucks group or whatever I want. Belonging to are which groups are going to display in the report. Again, everything is filtered through the data access in the user. But say you have a problem with idling for your vehicles in Chicago, so you just want to keep an eye on them. That's an instance where you could use belonging to just to focus on that one specific subgroup. I want to show you some of, and I'm not going to spend too long on this, but some of the reports that we have available in the marketplace. These are custom reports that you can add into your database. All of the slides here link directly to the marketplace. You can download this report. You can add it into your database. There's instructions here on how to do that, how the report works, how to set it up. It's all here. But I point these reports out specifically because they're reports that do a good job of taking a lot of data and boiling it down into maybe a number or two. This, for example, is the safety scorecard that we have. So this is looking at all these different rules: backing up when leaving, speeding, hard acceleration, harsh cornering, seatbelt, engine abuse. So we're taking all of that data and all of that behavior, and we're boiling it down to a single number. We're giving each driver a score. And based on that score, where do they fit within our expectations of driver behavior? Are they meeting our expectations? Are they below? Are they far below? Another good one is the last 3 months mileage trend. So this is going to look at all of the vehicles in your fleet, and it's going to put this graphic right here on your dashboard. So trending how many miles your fleet is being driven per month. Weekly idle cost, daily trend. This is going to look at how much money is being spent idling over the previous 7 days. You can download this report in gallons or in liters, depending on what country you're located in. Top 5 speeding violations report. So which top 5 vehicles or drivers are speeding the most? This is one where maybe you want to set it up by group. So who's speeding the most in Chicago? Who's speeding the most in Indianapolis? Who's speeding the most in Louisville? And so on. There is also, and there are webinars and white papers devoted to this topic in and of itself, the Fleet Savings Summary Report. This is a pretty big report, and I could talk about it for a long time, and I'm not going to. But this is looking at the behavior of all of your drivers, and it's looking at the class of vehicles in your fleet. And it's ultimately looking at how much money are you saving based on driver behavior, based on your fleet size, based on how many miles you're driving, but what's the potential savings as well. There is a link to this report, and on the marketplace page, there is a white paper devoted to this report. So if you are interested in this, I recommend checking it out and giving that white paper a read. Here we have the telematics device issue detection report. This is sort of an extension of the watchdog report, which I'm going to touch on briefly in a moment. But this is just looking at possible installation issues, if they're losing GPS signal, if the devices are maybe loose in the diagnostic port going offline. So this is a good way to look at some maybe trending information across your fleet related to Go device and vehicle health. Here, we have the last 3 months fuel trend report, similar to that mileage report. We're just looking at the fuel consumed over the previous 3 months. So again, those are all marketplace reports. Those are all 100% free to download, add into your database. A report, another one I'll mention that is not a custom report, it is a default report that is built into your database called the Watchdog report. Hopefully, many of you use this already, but this is your vehicle health report, and this just tells you if your vehicles are online or if they're offline or if they have not been installed. If you're not using this, highly recommend put this on your dashboard. There is a couple resources walk you through this as well. So back into some of the database features for a moment, there is a feature that is called additionally allow reporting by. When you give users data access, you get this field below it that says additionally allow reporting by these groups. Data access is what the user sees when they log into the database, what vehicles they can see, what assets they can see. Additionally allow reporting by is what the user sees when reports are sent out. You only need to use additionally allow reporting by if you want them to be different. So sometimes you do want your reporting hierarchy to be different from your standard group hierarchy. Maybe you want to email reports to individual drivers. Maybe you want certain users to receive reports for more vehicles for other regions than they would normally see when they log into the database because they want to see how their region is doing against others. Just a couple examples. So if you want what the user sees and what emailed reports they get to be the same, you don't have to do anything with additionally allow reporting by. You're only going to use it if you want your reporting to be different from what they see when they log into the database. Again, this is the exact same slide as before. This reporting can be customized to display different reports and data sets for different groups. So again, recipient list, who receives it, belonging to is which groups display. I'm going to jump into the database now, and I want to show you a little bit on mass editing. So this is a pretty handy tool, and it is available for vehicles, for users, and for zones. So here, for example, I'm in my users list. When I'm in my users list, I have this check mark right up here. When I click on this check mark, I can select visible, which is going to select all of the assets here, all of the users. I can select individual, or I can select all in the groups filter. And I'm going to show you the groups filter after mass editing. So say I want to mass assign some different users to a specific data access. I can go select individual, and I get these check marks here. Once I've finished, I can go right up here to edit selected users. Select. I have their security clearance, their data access. If I want to make these users drivers, if I want to mass edit their UI settings. So let's do data access. So we'll add groups, and we'll go into regions, and we'll assign these users to the West group. When I'm done, hit save. and apparently I've clicked something wrong, but otherwise, when you hit save, it's going to accept that information and it's going to assign all of those users to whatever you just put in there. Here, you can do the same thing with vehicles. You have a check mark right up here, select visible, select individual. So maybe I'll do select individual, and I want to assign these vehicles to a group. Edit selected devices. So here I can edit if they have work hours assigned to that vehicle or a time zone. I can mass edit driver feedback. I can mass edit groups. I think I know what I did with users. I did add groups instead of replace groups. I've learned my lesson. So now I'm going to change these and I'm going to update the groups. And again, I'm going to assign these vehicles to the West group. Hit save. That's how it should look. Hit accept. And now those vehicles have been reassigned to those new groups. Same thing with zones. Again, look for the check mark up here in the corner. I can select a few here. Go to edit selected zones. And then I can add groups or replace groups. I can change what type of zone they are. If they are a customer zone or a home zone or an office zone or any other custom zone types that you have in here. So anything in here, make your changes, hit save when you're done. And that's all there is to mass editing. Really useful feature and really simple to use. The last thing that I want to show you here in the database is the groups filter. The groups filter is a way to simulate data access. So I'll show you what I mean. Up here in the corner, and I can type in a group name and I can search for it. Or I have this little drop-down arrow right here. And I can click on that and go to, for example, regions. And when I click on West, now it's just going to show me vehicles assigned to the West group. If I go to the dashboard, if I run any sort of report, it's only going to show me data for vehicles in whatever I have selected up here. Again, it's a way to simulate data access. Maybe if I'm an admin and I just want to focus on one group. You can also have multiple groups up here. So maybe I want to look at both the West and the East groups. And I can just keep adding those on. When you're done, you can click on this X right here. That's going to clear out the groups filter, and it's going to bring you back to your normal view. So the groups filter, and you don't have to be an admin to use this, even if you're a lower security clearance. It is going to give you access to any groups below the group you have been assigned to. So for example, here in my regions, I have East, and inside of East, I have New York, Pittsburgh, and Toronto. If I myself have been assigned a data access of East, when I go to my groups filter, I'm going to see New York, Pittsburgh, and Toronto because it's below what I have been assigned to, which is East. And more resources on that. So back into the presentation here. So here's a page on groups filter. Now we get into all of these resources that we're going to send you off with. So document here on standard security clearances. We have a written guide and a how-to video on setting up security clearances, groups, creating groups, assigning vehicles to groups, stock rules, work hours, notifications. Here we have a webinar link if you want to get really into notifications and alerts, automating reports, mass editing vehicles, mass editing zones, mass editing users, and of course, using the groups filters. So that having been said, that is actually going to conclude the formal presentation for Wildcard Wednesday today. David, are there any questions?
Yes, we had one good question here regarding the additionally allow reporting by. So the question was, if the data group is the only vehicles we want them to see and the allow reporting by group is a higher access level.
Group is the only vehicles we want them to see, and the allow reporting by group is a higher access level or group, they will see other people's information on those reports. Yes, that is correct. Again, that's only if you want them to see more groups, but that's exactly what it does. When I log into the database, I only want the user to see these vehicles, but maybe when I email my scorecards out, I want them to see where they fit in. So that is a use for it. So another question did just come through. If they are on the same level, I thought that we would just be leaving it blank. So yeah, you're right. That's absolutely what you would do. Let me jump back into the database here. So here I'm setting up a user and I assign their data access. And I'm going to give them access to the West region, right? So regions, West. Now, if I want their data access and their reporting to be the same, I don't have to do anything else. I'm done. The only time you have to use this is if you want the reporting to be different from the data access. We have another question come in through here. Can you review how to create a custom hard acceleration rule for passenger vehicles versus trucks? That's a really good question, and yes, I can. So here within your rules, the first three rules that you have here are, we call them your ABC rules. So you have braking, acceleration, and cornering. These are based on the size of the vehicle, and you have this slider bar here. So we have passenger car, truck or cube van, heavy duty. Again, the motion of the vehicle size is going to change. You have this slider here, and you can adjust it based on the vehicle size. So say, for example, I am creating a custom rule for a heavy-duty truck, maybe a mid-size heavy-duty truck. I can see here that when I put harsh cornering in that range, it's at 0.34. What I'm going to do is hit this little pencil icon right here, and this is going to duplicate the rule, and I can use it to create a custom rule. So harsh cornering, 0.34 Gs. Click that pencil icon, and we'll go harsh cornering, heavy truck. I would assign it to my heavy truck group. Now I get into my conditions. So remember that G-force that it was for heavy truck was 0.34. This says 0.47. So the conditions aren't going to measure correctly unless I edit this. I can do that here with this little, it's called the Advanced Conditions Editor, and this is part of those resources. And all I want to do is find this 0.47 and change it to 0.34. Here it is right here. Change it from 0.47 Gs rounded to 0.34. And again down here, 0.34. I can then set up a notification if I want, don't have to, and save. I can now repeat the process for a passenger car, truck, cube van. You can see how that G-force changes. So if I want to make it for a delivery truck, so now I can see it's at 0.4 Gs. I would create another custom rule. I would go into my conditions editor and I would adjust this to 0.4. And it's just the same thing with these three rules. So that's how you would set that up. All right. So thank you for the questions. Looks like that is all that's coming through for right now. So want to thank you very much for attending Wildcard Wednesday today. We appreciate you taking time out of your day, and hopefully you got something out of this. Be sure to check out geotab.com/blog. We are always adding new and interesting content. So again, be sure to check that out. Thank you very much for attending. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot, everyone. Have a great day.